Because of why I search the deep through endless nights, no time to sleep. The call inside I can't deny. I'll find the light because of why.
Hey everyone, and welcome. When we talk about Japan's invasion of Manchuria back in 1931, we usually hear this simple story that it was just a grab for more land. But the real reasons? Oh, they're so much more complicated. So let's dive in and find out what was really going on.
So, was it just a straightforward act of imperial aggression, or was it the explosive result of a nation in crisis, a neighbor in total chaos, and a military that had gone completely off the rails? The simple answer? It doesn't even come close.
The truth is, the invasion was the product of a literal perfect storm. You had three huge forces all crashing into each other at the same time. The chaos tearing China apart from the inside, a deep-seated political and economic crisis happening in Japan, and a fatal flaw buried in Japan's own constitution. So let's break down what made up this storm piece by piece.
Okay, first up, we have to look at what was happening in China. Because to really get why Japan made its move, you have to understand that China's internal chaos basically rolled out the red carpet for what was to come.
So, picture this. In the early 1900s, China wasn't really a single unified country. After its last dynasty fell, the nation just shattered. You had the warlord era, where powerful generals carved up the country for themselves. A brutal civil war was kicking off between the nationalists and the communists. On top of that, foreign powers had their own little territories, and a new wave of Chinese nationalism was trying to kick them all out. It was just complete and utter chaos.
So if you're an ambitious Japan, looking over at this, you're not seeing a strong neighbor, you're seeing a massive power vacuum, a vulnerable, resource-rich land that looked like it was just there for the taking. This instability, that was the first key ingredient in our perfect storm. All right, so China's weakness was kind of pulling Japan in, right? But there are also these massive forces pushing Japan from the inside. The nation was staring down its own terrifying crisis at home. See, Japan's own democracy, well, it was in serious trouble. And this slide really tells the story. On one hand, you had all these promises, right? Party politics. But in reality, you had rampant corruption. They introduced universal male suffrage, but it happened right as the economy completely collapsed. The public felt totally and utterly betrayed. And we're not talking about just a small economic downturn here. This was mass starvation out in the countryside. It was record-breaking unemployment in the cities. And to make it all worse, people were furious about scandals where it looked like the giant corporations, the zaibatsu, were getting rich off the country's misery. I mean, for the average person, the whole system just felt completely rigged.
So what happens when people are that angry? You get a huge political vacuum. The people had zero faith left in their politicians to fix anything. And guess who stepped right into that gap? The one group that seemed to promise strength and national pride, the military.
But wait a second, how can a military just go off on its own? Well, that brings us to the absolute key to this whole mess. A constitutional loophole that basically made the Japanese army its own boss.
And here it is. It's a little thing called the right of supreme command. It was a clause in their constitution that said the army and navy answered directly to the emperor, not the prime minister, not the parliament. Basically, it cut the military completely loose from the government. They answered to no one but the emperor.
And you can see how unbelievably dangerous this is, right? Because the military didn't have to listen to the elected government. It meant a handful of radical, ultra-nationalist officers could literally start a war all by themselves, and there was nothing the government in Tokyo could do to stop them.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got a weak China, a desperate Japan, and an army that's completely off the leash. All that was needed was a spark, and that spark came on September 18th, 1931, and it was a total lie.
And check out how fast this all went down. At 10:20 at night, a few officers in Japan's Kwantan Army set off a tiny bit of dynamite on a railway they already controlled. Just 10 minutes later, they blamed Chinese soldiers for this supposed attack. And by 11 p.m., they were using that excuse to launch a full-on invasion. The entire thing, a total setup.
Now get this, look at the numbers here. The Japanese Kwantung Army had only 11,000 troops. The local Chinese army had almost 250,000.
On paper, this is an impossible fight, right? No way they should win. But the Chinese forces had been ordered by their own government to avoid a fight, so they barely resisted. The Kwantung Army's insane gamble had paid off.
So you've got this insane act of insubordination. A few rogue officers just started a war. But here's the crazy part. Instead of getting court-martialed, their actions were about to become Japan's official national policy. The invasion became what's called a fait accompli, basically a done deal that couldn't be reversed. Back home in Japan, the public was so desperate for some good news that they treated these officers like heroes. The media went wild, and this huge wave of nationalism washed over the country. At that point, it was politically impossible for the folks in Tokyo to say, "Whoa, stop."
And the fallout from this? It was massive, and it changed everything. Japan set up a puppet state in Manchuria. The military's power grew so huge that civilian party rule basically ended a year later. Japan quit the League of Nations, choosing to go it alone. And the craziest irony of all, the investment in this new territory created a war boom that actually helped pull Japan's economy out of the Depression, which in many people's eyes just proved the military was right all along.
So you see, it was never just one simple thing. It was that perfect storm. China's chaos created the opportunity, Japan's crisis at home created the desperation, and that independent military gave a few fanatics the power to light the fuse.
And that kind of leaves us with a pretty chilling thought, doesn't it? If history shows us that a disconnected government, widespread public anger, and a rogue element can send a country down such a dark path, it really makes you wonder, what stops something like this from happening again?
Hey, if you got something out of this deep dive, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I really want to know what you think, so drop your thoughts down in the comments.
All right, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.